177,000 fans, $2,000 front row tickets, one epic showdown, Caitlin Clark versus Diana Taurasi, the game that shook the WNBA and silenced the critics. You won't believe what happened when these two stars collided on the court. So who exactly is Diana Taurasi and why does her opinion matter so much? Let's talk about the WNBA legend who's been turning heads and breaking records for years. Taurasi isn't just any player. She's often called the GOAT of the WNBA. That's right, the greatest of all time. With multiple championships and scoring titles under her belt, Taurasi's got the kind of resume that makes people sit up and take notice. But here's where things get spicy. Taurasi didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat for Caitlin Clark. In fact, she threw some serious shade. When asked about Clark, Taurasi said she'd pick Paige Bueckers over Clark for the #1 draft pick. Her exact words? Absolutely. Ouch. That's gotta sting, especially coming from someone Clark looked up to. You see, Clark wasn't just any fan of Taurasi's. She grew up idolizing her. Clark even said she was probably one of the first women's basketball players I really grew up idolizing. Can you imagine how it must have felt for Clark to hear her childhood hero dismiss her like that? But here's where it gets really interesting. All this back and forth, all this drama, it set the stage for something huge. The face-off between Clark and Taurasi on June 30th, 2024 wasn't just any game. It was the game everyone was talking about. You think I'm exaggerating? Check this out. A whopping 177,000 fans showed up at the Footprint Center for this showdown. That's not just a lot of people. That's a record-breaking crowd for the WNBA. The buzz around this game was unlike anything the league had seen before. And if you thought getting tickets to this game would be easy, think again. Remember those $2,000 front row seats we mentioned earlier? That wasn't just for any game, that was for this game. To put that in perspective, courtside seats for popular teams like the Minnesota Lynx usually go for around $257. That's a pretty big jump, don't you think? The moment we've all been waiting for finally arrived. Clark versus Taurasi, rookie versus legend on the biggest stage of the WNBA season. But how did this clash of titans actually play out on the court? As the game tipped off, it looked like experience might trump youth. Taurasi came out firing, controlling the game's tempo and racking up points and assists like it was nothing. She was feeding the ball to her towering teammate, Brittany Griner, and the Mercury seemed unstoppable. You could almost hear the doubters saying, "See, Clark's not ready for the big leagues." But don't count Caitlin Clark out just yet. As the game progressed, we started to see flashes of what made her a college superstar. Those signature deep three-pointers, yeah, she brought those to the pros. At one point, Clark pulled up from way downtown and sank it, sending the crowd into a frenzy. It was like watching a young sharpshooter finding her rhythm in real time. Now let's talk about a moment that had everyone's jaws on the floor. Clark completely broke the ankles of Taurasi's teammate, Rebecca Allen. It was the kind of move you rewind and watch again in slow motion. The crowd went wild, and even some of the Mercury fans couldn't help but be impressed. But here's where things got a bit controversial. The refs seemed to have it out for Clark. There was this one play where Clark made what looked like a clean steal on a pick and roll. But instead of praising her defensive skills, the ref blew the whistle and called a foul on her. The crowd wasn't happy, and honestly, neither were we. And it didn't stop there. Later in the game, Clark got called for an offensive foul that had fans scratching their heads. Many thought it should have been a defensive foul instead. It seemed like Clark couldn't catch a break from the officials. But you know what's interesting? Throughout all this, Taurasi seemed hesitant to guard Clark directly. For someone who had talked a big game before, she was awfully quick to pass the defensive assignment to her teammates. What do you think that was about? As the game wore on, we saw a shift in momentum. Taurasi's early dominance started to fade, and Clark and the Fever began mounting a comeback. It was like watching a passing of the torch in real time. One play really stands out. Taurasi missed a three-pointer, and before you could blink, Clark had the ball. She baited Taurasi into a steal attempt and then made a perfect assist to her teammate. It was the kind of heads-up play that separates good players from great ones. But the real highlight, Clark nailing a three-pointer from the logo right after Taurasi missed one of her own. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. As the game entered its final moments, the tension was palpable. The Mercury's once 15-point lead had evaporated, thanks largely to Clark's heroics. In a crucial play, Taurasi missed a three-pointer and didn't get back on defense fast enough, resulting in a flagrant foul. That gave Indiana 2 free throws in possession, a game-changing moment. Remember how we left off with Clark and Taurasi facing off in that epic showdown? Well, let me tell you, what happened next was nothing short of amazing. Just when it looked like Taurasi and the Mercury had this game in the bag, Clark decided to flip the script. Picture this, the Mercury are up by 15 points and everyone's thinking it's game over, but Clark, she's just getting started. She leads the Fever on a comeback that'll have you on the edge of your seat. It's like watching a master chess player always thinking 2 moves ahead. So how did Clark pull off this miracle? It wasn't just about scoring points, she kept her cool under pressure even when things got heated. You know how some players lose their head when the game gets tough? Not Clark. She stayed focused, kept her teammates involved, and waited for her moments to strike. And strike she did. Those deep three-pointers we've all come to love, she was hitting them like it was practice, but it wasn't just about the flashy plays. Clark was breaking ankles left and right, making the Mercury defense look silly. Now let's talk about Taurasi for a second. The WNBA legend made some crucial mistakes that cost her team big time. There's this one play that really stands out. Taurasi misses a three-pointer, and instead of hustling back on defense, she takes her sweet time. Big mistake. The refs call a flagrant foul on her, and suddenly the Fever have 2 free throws in possession. Talk about a game changer. But wait, it gets better. In the final moments of the game, with everything on the line, both players step up to the free throw line. Taurasi, she only makes 1 out of 2, but Clark, cool as a cucumber, she sinks both of hers. That's the kind of clutch performance that separates the good from the great. And just like that, Clark and the Fever pull off the unthinkable. They secure their first win against a team with a winning record this season. It's not just a win, it's a statement. So what happened after that epic showdown between Clark and Taurasi? Let's dive into the aftermath and see how this game changed everything. Remember how Taurasi was throwing shade at Clark before the game? Well, guess what? She had to eat her words. After watching Clark's incredible performance, Taurasi couldn't help but give credit where it was due. She actually said, "I'll tell you, so what Caitlin's been able to do in her short career so far has just been nothing short of remarkable." Talk about a 180-degree turn. But this game didn't just change Taurasi's opinion. It was a game changer for Clark's entire WNBA career. Think about it. Leading the Indiana Fever to a comeback win against a team with a winning record? That's not something they'd done all season. Clark wasn't just playing well, she was making history. And let's talk about those skills she showed off. Remember that deep three from the logo? Or how about that steal followed by a perfect assist? Clark wasn't just good, she was putting on a show. She proved she could hang with the best of the best, and then some. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Before this game, Taurasi kind of brushed Clark off, right? She even avoided guarding her directly on the court. But after this performance, the whole dynamic shifted. Taurasi couldn't ignore Clark anymore. She had to acknowledge her as a real threat, a force to be reckoned with in the league. And the fans, oh boy, they were loving every second of it. The energy in that arena was electric. Can you believe 177,000 fans showed up to watch this game? That's not just a lot. That's a record-breaking crowd for the WNBA. Clark wasn't just playing basketball. She was putting on a show that people were willing to pay big bucks to see. Speaking of big bucks, remember those courtside tickets going for $2,000? That's the kind of draw Clark has. She's not just changing the game on the court, she's changing the economics of the WNBA. The media couldn't get enough of Clark's performance either. All the coverage was about how she led this incredible comeback, how she outplayed Taurasi, and how she turned all those doubters into believers. It was like watching a star being born right before our eyes. What do you think this means for the future of women's basketball? Clark didn't just win a game, she made a statement. She showed that the new generation is here and they're ready to take on the legends. So what's next for Caitlin Clark? How will this game shape her career moving forward? And what about Taurasi? How do you think she'll approach their next matchup? One thing's for sure, the WNBA just got a whole lot more exciting. What are your thoughts on this epic showdown and its aftermath?